All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Miller. I'm the forum chairperson. George Galizzo takes care of technology, of which we had a bunch of trouble this morning, which we always do, but somehow we muddle through. Next week is going to be the Bridge Project, how a Zilber Family Foundation grantee gives away cash to no strings attached. So hope you can make it. So without further ado, Dennis will present his talk.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for coming today. This is So Unitarian. It's Easter Sunday, and I'll be talking about sacred traditions in another culture. So my talk is called Journey to the Sacred Heart of China. So George, the first slide. So I got my bachelor's and master's degrees in medicine and entomology, insects. And then I went out to Berkeley in the fall of 1967 to start on a PhD in insect pathology. That's microbial control of insect pests. And I got there at a pretty interesting time. 1968 was my first full year. And many of you would probably remember what 1968 was like. And if you amplify that, that's what it was like to be on the campus. So I was 1A for the draft for the second time, soon got involved in all the anti-war protests, and just about everything else that was going on at that time. All I'll say is I didn't miss much. So George, the first slide. Next slide, actually.
There's the clicker.
Oh, okay. There it is, all right. Yep, there's me after 2 years in Berkeley. When I got out there right for my ag fraternity with my bro cream and everything else, and it didn't take me long to get involved, especially when you were 1A for the draft. Jung was in the air. I never heard of Jung, but his name kept coming up in such interesting and diverse context. And then in 1973, I read my first Jung, and I was so taken by Jung. It was a way to integrate science, psychology, and spirituality in a holistic and an ecological manner. So within 9 months, I was applying to train at the Jung Institute in Zurich, and I got accepted. And since then, I have been integrating my Jungian psychology and environmental issues. I have a lot of topics on my blog on Jung and climate change and so on. So that's the first of my 4 volumes of the Dairy Farmer's Guide to Views. Jung, Hermes, and Eco-Psychology. That's the little farm I grew up on. 25 miles east of Green Bay, Kewaunee County, 5 miles from the town of Kewaunee. And off the top right corner will be where I collected the yarrow, and that'll come into play soon. This was my second volume, The Cry of Merlin, Jung, the prototypical eco-psychologist. Third volume, Hermes, Eco-Psychology and Complexity Theory. And then my last volume, Land, Weather, Seasons, Insects, and Archetypal View. So I started reading Jung, and it kept mentioning this book that I never heard of before, the I Ching, or as the Chinese pronounce it, the I Ching. And what do you know, So Unitarian again, Berkeley, in July of 1975, at a week-long series of events to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Jung's birth. And the last event they had was a I Ching workshop. So I was shown how to use the yarrow stalk method to consult the Jing, and that's the only way I've ever done it. Most people use coins. So the reason that I'm so interested in China is because of the I Ching. I wanted to see where this book came from, what the people were like, and how this influenced their culture. So the Jing is one of the Chinese classics. It's had an incredible influence on the Chinese culture and the worldview. So think of the Bible in our culture. Now, many people are not churchgoers, but our culture is still profoundly influenced by the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's the same thing in China. So there are two amazing aspects of this book. One is the wisdom of the book, and the second is that it gets Jung put into the mystical and therefore dismissed dimension. You can actually consult it. You can ask a question to the book, something that's really important in your life, like let's say you're having a lot of problems in your marriage or something. And you can ask the book wisdom to guide me in my marriage. And the amazing thing, I've been working with this book for 50 years, is that the answers are meaningful. There are 4,096 possible answers. So, and speaking of the 60s, what do you know? There's the I Ching, the Richard Wilhelm translation, still one of the classic translations. And there's Bob Dylan. It's one of the outtakes from his album, Bringing It All Back Home. And notice what's on the floor there, the I Ching. Dylan said in a 1965 interview, said the I Ching is the only thing that is amazingly true, period. I agree with him. Besides being a great book to believe in, it's also very fantastic poetry. So I hope to give you a little sense of that later on. So this book actually goes back to Chinese shamanism. Those characters, those Chinese characters, that's the shamans scratched some images on tortoise shells. Then they stuck tortoise shells into the fire, and then they would read the cracks. And those images were the beginning of the Chinese language. So that's how far back this book goes. They came up with combinations of yin and yang lines, solid and broken lines, and then in 1050 BC, we're talking 3,000 years ago, King Wen, he was the founder of the Zhou dynasty. He doubled the trigrams to produce the first hexagram, 6 lines. And that, then Confucius, around 500 BCE, was the 10th or 12th editor. Confucius lived at the same time as, about the same time as Socrates and Buddha. So this is like I said, a fundamental book in Chinese culture. Has a lot of Taoism in it and Confucianism, and that's the reason why the Chinese think in terms of systems, interconnectedness, and harmony as a cultural imperative. If you ask a Chinese person a question, they're not going to give you a yes or no answer. They are used to dealing in complexities and interrelationships. So the Jing then is composed. There's our good man, Confucius. I was able to visit his hometown and the temple there. And these are the 64 hexagrams. This is an early arrangement of the hexagram. It's the Fu Si arrangement. It's the binary code. It's the same code that computers run on. The Chinese developed this about 3,000 years ago. Leibniz, who came up with a binary code, was bummed out when he found out the Chinese had scooped it about a few thousand years. So you see there are just various combinations of yin, broken lines, and yang, solid lines. So to give you an example of a hexagram and the kind of wisdom in the book, this is one of my favorite hexagrams, and it is derived from the hexagram on the left, which is called standstill or stagnation. Those upper 3 lines, the yang lines, are connected with heaven. So that tends to move up. The lower three lines are yin lines, that's earth, they tend to move down. So heaven and earth are out of relationship to each other. That to the Chinese is standstill. And in Jungian critique of Christianity, that's one of the main problems. It is so otherworldly and spiritually oriented, it loses connection with the body, sensuality, sexuality, and the feminine. So hexagram 42 is on the right, and what the Chinese see is happening is the lowest of the three top lines come down to help the lines below it. And this is what Wilhelm says about that. It says the idea of increase is expressed in the fact that the strong lowest line of the upper trigram has sunk down and taken its place on the lower trigram. And this conception also expresses the fundamental idea upon which the Book of Changes, the I Ching, is based. To rule truly is to serve. A sacrifice of the higher element that produces an increase of the lower is called an out-and-out increase. It indicates the spirit that alone has power to help the world. The spirit that alone has power to help the world. So take this as an archetypal statement. It's true across all levels like a fractal is in complexity theory. Think about the inequality in the races, about income levels, between countries, and between humans and the environment. So this, to me, is the guiding hexagram of our age. So when you consult the Jing, like I said, you get meaningful answers, and it's like some benevolent energy in the universe sees you and understands you at a very deep level. It's pretty uncanny to ask a question about something that's really troubling you, and so many times I use it personally and with analysts, and the people will say, that's just how I feel about it. So that's been my experience. But think about what kind of worldview you would have to have for that. So if you would think of that's how God speaks to you through this, I have no problem with that. But to experience it is something else, and experience it on a regular basis. So I'm an old Pink Floyd fan. Got to Berkeley fall of '67. My roommates prepared me properly for the first Pink Floyd concert. Say no more, as Monty Python would say. And this is their first album, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And one of their songs was called Chapter 24, and it's words right out of Wilhelm's hexagram 24, the turning point. So the reason I get invited to lecture in China and to teach on Zoom is because of Jung and primarily because of my deep connection to the Jing. I just felt immediately connected with it as soon as I started using it, just like with Jung. And I've presented at 3 international conferences on Jungian psychology and Chinese culture. The first one was in 1998. My paper was called Use of the I Ching in the Therapeutic Setting. I show people I use it with my analysts in therapy, especially in conjunction with dream work. The second conference was in 2018, and I showed a video called Seasons of the Soul, and it's a 15-minute video where I use the upper Midwest weather and climate to illustrate. I talk about it in an archetypal and mythical and spiritual dimension. And I use many concepts from the I Ching to frame that talk. And then in December of 2023, at the 10th International Conference, Jungian Psychology and Chinese Culture, I used something right out of James Hillman, The Thought of the Heart and the Soul of the World, one of my favorite books by Hillman, Hexagram 31, and our species' relationship with the environment. So if any of you are really interested, I could give you a copy of that paper. So what I thought of before, there's me addressing the conference, and the thought came to me before going over there to collect some yarrow from our farm, just a little north of our farm, make a bundle of yarrow stalks. That's one of the traditional ways of consulting the Jing. And then I presented that to Dr. Ouyang Shen. He is the first Chinese analyst in China and has been very instrumental in getting Jungian psychology going in China. China probably has the largest number of undergraduate and graduate students in the world studying Jungian psychology. They've got 200 of them. There are 5 developmental centers, and people like me teach courses and help supervise students there. And those will be turning into Jungian training centers in China. So I have this deep connection with Dr. Ouyang, and I think he respects my connection with the I Ching. So there I'm offering the yarrow stalks to him, and then he bowed, he gave me a big hug, and then proceeded to tell the audience of about 500 Chinese people and 30 foreigners to the Chinese about what had just happened. So I will go from there, then what happened to, oh my gosh, that's too bad. Well, I had some great pictures of us drinking wine and beer and talking with the Chinese and eating some meals. I can't believe that I didn't put these photos in there. They were there last night. But anyway, you can imagine what it's like talking with a lot of and the meals were fantastic. Even for breakfast, we had 200 choices of food. I came back to the States in our favorite Chinese restaurant here on Merritt Street, Guangxi. I mean, I could hardly eat it. It was just superb. But they treated us so well at the conference, and then I was in the post-conference tour, and the premium level hotels and so on weren't that much more than the regular, so I ate well throughout the whole thing. So, yeah. So now this is a location for Qingdao. That's the province. You can see Beijing there. And then notice below Beijing where it says Yellow Sea, just to the left of Yellow Sea is Qingdao. So that's where the conference was. And the reason the conference was there is that was part of China that the Germans had colonized. And because of that, the beer from China is from Qingdao. If you go to a Chinese restaurant, order beer, it's probably going to be Qingdao. And this was a German sinologist. He connected so deeply with the Chinese. Jung was concerned when he moved back to Germany that it would affect him, and Jung thought it was the reason he died young, because he never was able to be reintegrated back into the West. So he sent Jung a copy of the I Ching. He worked with an old Taoist master and translated the Jing into German. And Jung and Wilhelm, Jung thought he and Wilhelm were the 2 main pillars for introducing Chinese wisdom to the West. Then Carrie Baines, the wife of a British Jungian analyst living in Cambridge, so that's probably how Pink Floyd found out about the Jing so early, translated the German into English, and then Jung wrote the foreword to that English translation in English. And it was such a good introduction, the Germans had to translate Jung back into German. So, but it's a fabulous introduction to the Jing. Jung actually asked the book what it thought about being translated. And the book gave him an amazing answer. You can read about it yourself. So, like I said, because it was in Qingdao, we all got a beer can, and it had our names on it. And 2 hexagrams, one of them, the lower one, is one of my favorite hexagrams, Inner Truth. So the Chinese really give you these, well, there are the pictures there, okay. I always like to place people in the world before I start talking about where they are. So there's, there we are, having some great food, and then on to the inland China. So at this point, I would like to welcome Terence to our room here. Terence accompanied me on a good part of my trip through China, and he made it possible for me to go an 11-mile hike in one of the most fantastic parts of China, the karst area. You have to have a Chinese person to do that because 3 times you have to cross a river. And to get to the second crossing, we were going through all these little Chinese villages, and Terence had asked where the boat landing was, and then he had to call the boatman on the other side to come and get us. So only because of that was I able to hike there. So Terence, there's a picture of you in the karst district. These are these paintings we've seen in China. I thought they were imaginary. These are real paintings. So a lot of artists and so on go down there and to be inspired. You can buy these little prayer flags, write something on, a prayer and so on. And then you can see the hill behind it. You can see the stairway going up there. This is from the top of the stairway. There are all the prayer flags. And that's a good picture of Terence, I think. I hope you like it, Terence. So he was going to stay up tonight and watch this. Then we started on our trip to Guilin. Oh, that Guilin is that different part of China. That's where the car started. And Terence spent a year in Florida in high school, and he went out for football. And it was a wide receiver, so by his own admission, he wasn't that good a receiver. I think he caught a touchdown pass once by mistake, so they called him Touchdown Terence. So this photo is for you, Terence. 2 years ago, my son and my wife treated me to as a Christmas present to the Green Bay Packers football game. That's when we beat the Bears. Jordan loves coming out party. So I had to make a little sign for us. All Packer fans know the Packers started in 1921, sponsored by the Acme meat packing plant. So the sign says packing bear meat since 1921. And my cheese hat and the whole works. It was a fab. So for Terence, that's our Mecca, that's our sacred place here in Wisconsin. I had an analyst whose daughter dreamt of a sacred football. This is a teenage girl. So there is Mount Lao, or Lao Tzu. It's north and east of Qingdao, and that's going to be the first sacred site that we're going to visit. It's 19 miles northeast. And it's one of my 2 favorite sacred sites of those that I have seen in China. It's one of the birthplaces of Taoism, where the complete perfection school of Taoism was developed. So every major Chinese thinker and writer, philosopher has bounced off of the I Ching, and like I said, a good part of what's in the Jing is Taoist. So my favorite Taoist text is by David Hinton's translation of the Tao Te Ching. by Lao Tzu. And Hinton describes the Tao in this way. The philosophy of Tao embodies a cosmology rooted in the most primal and wondrous presence, Earth's mysterious generative force, venerated as the Great Mother. She continuously gives birth to all creation, and like natural processes which she represents, she also takes life and regenerates it in an unending cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The awesome generative force appears most explicitly in Lao Tzu's recurring references to the female principle in a variety of manifestations: mother, female, feminine, yielding, source, origin, etc. It is everywhere in the Tao Te Ching, or it is nothing other than the Tao itself. So notice the profound connection to nature that the Tao implies. So this is on the journey up to that sacred Taoist temple, just these beautiful hills next to the ocean. The rocks just seem kind of soft. I love the colors. Then you come down on the other side of the mountain next to the ocean. Some beautiful rocks in the ocean. This is looking out from the entrance to the temple. And just above those two buses on the right, you can see a sliver of light. That's the road to get down to the temple. We have to transfer from a bigger bus to the smaller buses to take you down there. This is looking into the temple, the big yin-yang symbol, symbol greeting you there. And this is the largest temple complex on Mount Lao. There are several of them. And this is the temple of supreme purity. This shows you some of the very primitive, some of the earlier Chinese forms of their ideogram, where you can still see kind of like a person in some of those things. And there you have the 8 trigrams around the yin-yang symbol. And here's a wonderful saying that Terence translated for me. It's the last 4 words of this Taoist saying. The saying is, man follows the ways of earth. Earth follows the ways of heaven. Heaven follows the ways of the Tao. The Tao follows the ways of nature. Wonderful saying. Just to the left of that is a Kentucky Fried Chicken stand. So it was the only one there. So you start walking up the hill, and there is one of the fierce guardians in that little box. There's what it looks like. Going a little further, you see one of these beautiful stands, and of course you've got to rub it for good luck. This is my favorite part. Probably my favorite place in China in terms of sacred images. There you see a tree, a stone turtle to the right, and just above the base of the tree, you see 2 figures. So keep in mind about the Tao in nature as I describe this. This tree is called a long tall tree. It's 1,200 years old. And notice there's a Chinese woman embracing the tree. It's called that, the science says it's called that because its trunk branches are curly like a dragon egg. It's said to have been planted by one of the Taoist immortals at the end of the Tang Dynasty. For some historical perspective then, I got this out of Wikipedia, the Tang Dynasty in China spanned from 618 to 907 CE. This period is widely considered a golden age of Chinese civilization in a high point of cosmopolitan culture. So yesterday was the 250th anniversary of the firing of the first shots of the American Revolution. And we're talking about the golden age of Chinese civilization from 600 to 900 AD. So we're talking about very ancient cultures that have been in the same place for eons. Beside the long-toed elk is this wonderful turtle, the green stone turtle made of stone from Mount Lao. The sign says the turtle is one of the 4 deities, like the Qilin, phoenix, turtle, and dragon. So the dragon symbolizes power and strength, the phoenix, renewal and grace, the tortoise, longevity and stability, and the Qilin, prosperity and righteousness. Prosperity and righteousness. The Chinese always think of that hexagram 42, always combine the idea of harmony and righteousness. Together, these beings convey a collective message of good fortune and balance. So the Chinese worship the tortoise as the god of the north, water, reproduction, and fate. It is a symbol of immortality, and the people who pray to it may receive longevity. Now, for those of you, like myself, who weren't familiar with the Qilin, there's one image of it. It's really a composite, sort of like the Sphinx. And actually, Qilin, Qi means male and Lin means female. And it has 5 different colors, et cetera, real composite. There's another image for it. And this, to me, is the essence of Taoism, to me, the essence of China. It's in that courtyard, and it's 2 sages in dialogue. See the stack of books or whatever in front of them? And here's the other one. That's in the courtyard, in this wonderful setting with the tree, the stone, tortoise, and then there are these guys. So their image is not of some guy crucified on a cross, or some blue or purple gods or goddesses with 10 or 12 arms. To me, it's these sages in dialogue. I also admired the bark in this courtyard of a 700-year-old ginkgo tree, a tree that's endemic to China. So the main structure in the Temple of Supreme Purity Complex is the Hall of the 3 Pure Ones, housing the statues of the Taoist Trinity, the Grand Pure One, the Supreme Pure One, and the Jade Pure One. And they're all venerable-looking male figures seated in chairs. And there are, in another hall, there are figures of the 3 emperors, and then there's the officials' hall. I only got pictures from the officials' hall. So in the officials' hall, you have the god or the governor of celestial affairs. That's this guy. And then to his right is the god or governor of earthly affairs. So you notice these are men just sitting there looking very dignified. And then on the left side is the god or governor of water. And on the outside wall of that temple, there's an imperial decree from Genghis Khan granting Taoism protection. So then on we go toward the statue of Lao Tzu, and Terence wanted me to strike a pose here. So this is the largest statue of Lao Tzu in the world. It's 150 feet tall. There's another angle. And at the base is this engraving on the stone, Lao Tzu riding his ox. And the myth is that Lao Tzu kind of got fed up, I think, with what was going on in culture. So he was going to escape into the mountains. And on a mountain pass, he conveyed the Tao Te Ching to the guard at the pass. So when you start walking down from that spot, notice the ox there on the right, and here it is. So we're going to move from there to my second favorite sacred spot, one of the most sacred in China. How many of you have heard of Mount Tai? So a bunch of virgins in the group. I didn't hear about it either, but it just shows you how ignorant we are of the West, of this dimension of Chinese culture. Fortunately, we were there in December. I've seen all the pictures I'm going to show you except one are pictures I took, but when I went online, and it's just like a freeway full of people going up there. So there's Mount Tai. You can see Beijing. We were just right of that in Qingdao. And this is the map of the mountain. So, the Mount Tai, yes, is a place of worship for at least 3,000 years in China. One of the most important ceremonial centers in China, going back to probably King Wen. He's the guy who doubled the trigrams to create the hexagrams in 1050 BCE. So a total of 72 emperors were recorded as visiting this place, making sacrifices of food and jade to pay homage to heaven and earth. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and is associated with sunrise, birth, and renewal. This is Easter Sunday, right? Is often regarded as the foremost of the 5 sacred mountains in China. This is the Dai Temple at the base of the mountain. And it's the temple for the god of the mountain. And it's an ancient building complex in the city of Taishan. And the myth is that, here's our guy, that this Dongyue emperor, the supreme god, is a descendant of Panzhi, or is believed to be the eastern one of the 5 manifestations of the highest deity. So here's Panzhi. He's a central figure in Taoist myths and legends. He came forth from an egg. I think that's where arrows came from in our Greek mythology. And he separated heaven and earth. We've heard this story before, also in Egyptian mythology. And he set the sun, moon, stars, and planet in space and divided the 4 seas. He shaped the earth by chiseling out valleys and stacking up the mountains. And all this is accomplished from Panzhi's knowledge of the yin-yang. See how basic this concept is in Chinese culture. The inescapable principle of the duality of all things. So the Dongyue emperor was ordered by the sky to govern the world. And so he's the incarnation of Mount Tai and the holy messenger of communication between heaven and the world and the patron saint of the emperors and their dynasties. He started out as a mountain god, and since ancient times, Mount Tai has been seen as a sacred place where the spirits of the dead gather. So the god of Mount Tai was thought to be the supreme deity of the underworld, who governed the lifespan and the status of human beings. So his temple then is the first stop by pilgrims that are visiting the mountains, and it's one of the most sacred Taoist temples. Emperors came there to worship and to pay homage to the god, to receive their mandates from heaven. So notice as we go through this area, how nature plays such an integral part. And here I think of Bob Dylan talking about the Jing being a book of poetry. We've all heard these flowery Chinese names, but think of that as part of Chinese culture. All right? So these are called the behaved admiring flowers. This is winter time, so we don't see them flowering. And just notice the many abstract forms. We've all seen these things in Chinese culture, but just think of this as being something integral about the way you see the world. To put a stone like this on a pedestal. There's some more. Then we get into some of the ancient trees in this temple complex. And this is called the top-ranked cypress tree, one of several really sacred cypress trees. It's 2,000 years old, and it was planted by an emperor who died in 87 BC. So the Chinese see animal symbols in this tree. They see a head of a dragon in that burrow in the tree, and they associate it somehow or another with some great military victory. There's another ancient tree, one of the 8 special ones, and to the Chinese it looks like a dragon. They kind of see like a dragon head there at the tip of that tree. There's another magnificent old tree. A lot of really nice temples there. And on the side, there are some temples with women. There's some flowers and things in there. But again, these are their gods and the goddesses. There's a woman, of course, woman, again, symbol. And this is the one of the most important ancient architectural complexes in China, started in 211 BC. And here's some impressive old arch. Just look at the beauty of the construction there. And on the side, some dragon symbolism. And a wonderful old tin vessel. That's what the emperors were served rice in. So like communion is turned into wine in Christianity, so the wine in there was served, the rice was served at the sacred festivals. Now the emperors had their steles made, and of course they were on the back with tortoises and known for stability and longevity. And now we look north from this temple complex. So the god of the mountain is in this temple complex in the city. Then if you go almost straight up from there, 6,660 steps, you get to the top of the mountain. But, and here's what we were all given that went on the tour. It's an emblem of the mountain. And there you see the many peaks and so on on this mountain. The very top is the Jade Peak. And that is where we see the goddess from Mount Tai. She is the primordial sovereign of the colored clouds of dawn. That's the goddess of China. Primordial, her temple, she's called the primordial sovereign of the colored clouds of dawn. And her temple is the palace of the clouds of dawn. And there she is. This is our Milwaukee version of it. I was at Atwater Beach one morning early, and there was a photographer taking a picture of this woman coming out of the water. This is our archetypal image. And I ran after them when they were leaving and asked if I could have the photo, and they gave it to me. So we cheated. We took that green route by bus, and then took a cable car to the top, and there we ride the cable car up. And then walked and walked and walked till we got to the very top. This is a Chinese woman living in Denmark. She was my companion part of the way, going through some of the gates. And just these beautiful views and these temples everywhere. I was going to mention somewhere just how many temples and things there are. Oh, yes, okay. They're on this mountain. This whole mountain complex, there are 22 temples, 97 ruins, 819 stone tablets, and 1,018 cliffside and stone inscriptions. And you look out from there and just these beautiful mountains kind of in the mist. Then this Danish Chinese woman went down to one of the temples, lit some incense and said some prayers. So I tried to mimic her in doing that. And then we continued walking up. And eventually we got to the top, the courtyard there. And on the side were two of the sort of the cohorts or whatever for the mother goddess. And this is where the story gets really interesting. One of the women on our tour, I noticed that she had this beautiful basket of flowers. So I asked her how she got them. And she said, oh, this was an offering to the mother goddess. And after somebody makes an offering, they put it out, and anybody who wants can take one. So she really felt that this was the mother goddess of China that she was experiencing there, and she was going to take these flowers home to her children. So when we started walking down from the mountain, we started talking, and there you see some of the inscriptions on the stone. And notice just off to the right there, we go off to the right, and she starts looking at this space and then telling me what she sees. And it's one of the most beautiful descriptions I have ever heard of some scenery. You see some mountains kind of lost in the cloud there. It was so beautiful, I asked her if I could record it. And she wanted to record it in Chinese, which Terence did for me, and then he translated it into English, and I lost the translation. But she just went on in such a beautiful way about it. And then I think of it this way, in the Jungian way. It is in the Greek Asclepions, the Greek healing temples. If you were ill, you would go to an Asclepion and do some fasting and purification ceremonies, and then would sleep in the temple and hope to be visited by the god Asclepius or his animals, a cock or a dog. And then the next day, the priest would interpret your dreams, and your healing was to know what god or goddess to worship. So each god and goddess is a complete worldview from their perspective. So the Greek god Ares, for example, sees everything in terms of conflict, the Greek god of war. The goddess Aphrodite sees the world in terms of beauty, sensuality, and so on. And each, to get to worship at a temple, to be healed in, this was like a gestalt. Every temple had a particular location, or a time of day, particular food, type of music, birds, flowers, and so on, just to get you into what it is like to be in that world. So this is how I thought of what she was doing. And then the next day on the bus, the most amazing thing happened. I was sitting alone, and Matilda came and sat beside me, and she made this drawing for me. She thought that we had a synchronistic connection the day before, because after that happened on the mountainside, I walked with her all the way back to the cable car and all the way down again. She made this drawing for me, and she called it A Memorable Fate. And then gave me this drawing of what she saw on the mountaintop. And I told her I was interested in Chinese calligraphy, and she spent about 20 minutes breaking down her family name and her personal name with all these little diagrams. So again, try to get into the mind of the Chinese culture. When they see their name, it's not just Joe Smith. You know, the Chinese, these are picture words. They're composed of many different elements. And this is one of my favorite Chinese picture words. It's the Chinese ideogram for the sage. And if you break it down, it's the ear listening to the inner king. So that's a process. the ear listening to the inner king. That's a receptive process. That to me is the process and goal of Jungian psychology. Jungians talk about the self, the center and centering element in the psyche, and it appears like in numerous dreams, big dreams that you had, or a spirit animal in a dream, or what Native American will get on their vision quest, and so on. So this is how I think of what I experienced with Matilda. For Matilda, a mother of 2 children, I think she was describing to me what it's like for her to believe that she is on the top of the most sacred mountain in China, in the presence of the mother goddess of China, in her palace of the clouds, and looking out through the eyes under the influence of that mother goddess and seeing this incredible beauty out there. Thank you. This is my website, ecoyoga.com, and has my article on using the Qing in the analytic setting. YogiEcoPsychology.com has a lot of my articles on George Floyd, guns in the American psyche, things like that. And there's my email address. And I bought some show and tell here. I bought the beer bottle, the Yarrow stock, bundle of Yarrow stocks, the I Ching book. Also bought some of my books. So I'm sorry I ran over time. It took me a lot of time to prepare this. When you have a limited time, it always takes more time. But anyway, so now we have some time for some questions and comments and so on.
Is there a Jungian study group here in Milwaukee or more than one?
Well, it's a good question, Dennis. There was one many years ago, Yoga Society of Milwaukee, and it disappeared about 20 years ago. So I used to come here from Madison and give lectures in the meeting room downstairs. And I came out several times before I looked into the church and I said, oh, there's a church here. Kind of reminds me of the joke about Unitarians and the fires. I don't know if you heard that. But the Catholic church burned down, the priest ran in to get the monstrance, and a temple burned down, the rabbi ran in and got the Torah, and a Unitarian society burned down, and the minister ran in to get the coffee pot. So, it's so much of this is about community and connection and so on. And so what I tried to bring in today, it's one thing quite frankly, I don't get enough of a transcendent sense here. But I have been wanting to get a young society going again. I have over $1,000 to do that, left over from the previous incarnation. I just have never had the time to do it. I think it would be good to do.
Dennis,
Yes?
I noticed, I was impressed that, I don't know what, during the Cultural Revolution, did the Chinese pretty much leave Tao alone, or did they
That's a
destroy
great
Lao
question.
Tzu?
Yeah, move the question a little bit, Dennis.
I
Deborah
was asking
asked
during
about during the Cultural Revolution if they left the Tao alone. And what is so amazing to me is hardly any of the Chinese know about the I Ching. They know about it. Every time I met a Chinese person in the university, and I've been around universities forever, they say, oh, very mysterious book, or my grandmother used it, or whatever. And when I talked to several of the students over there, not that many of them are that familiar with it either. So what I asked one of the Chinese teachers that I'm taking the course with, And she said there's so much emphasis on trying to catch up with the West and on science and materialism and so on. It kind of left this behind. So during the Cultural Revolution, I honestly don't know which was your question, just what happened with this. But even with Wilhelm, that translated the Qing into German, he worked with some old masters that was on the outs with Chinese culture. So I don't know when this suppression began. But I talked years ago with a friend of mine in Berkeley. He went to some Midwestern university, I don't know if it was Oberlin, and he had a course on Chinese culture. And the instructor said, yeah, the Chinese have lost connection with the Qing, but it'll come back when the time is right. That's just the way they think. They think in terms of like centuries. You know, we think in terms of the next quarterly report for the stockholders. Now, when you think of what the Chinese, they have this Belt and Road plan. They have like 10 areas they want to dominate, like artificial intelligence, electric cars, solar panels, that sort of thing. And they put together, they just plan long terms, they set up and so on. And then I think of what our government did several years ago. They wanted to, I don't know, have cable out to rural areas, and they gave the AT&T companies a lot of money, which the companies basically pocketed it. You know, it's very different in China. I think that the rulers there really feel that they have to be responsible to the people. The Chinese are pretty, they kind of believe in synchronicities and so on. And there was some period before, I don't know if it's for Mao or something, one on the end of one of the Chinese rulers, there were a lot of earthquakes. So the Chinese said, no, going to be a change soon. So they think this way. And that's very different from this. Any other questions? Yes?
We talked about how we're pretty ignorant about Chinese culture in the United States. I think that's probably true of a lot of cultures, that we're ignorant about a lot of cultures here. But do you see, especially like with the current climate, do you think there's a possibility for connection with China or with Chinese culture, or anything like that?
The question was that Americans are not only ignorant about Chinese culture, but a lot of other cultures. That is certainly true. And all I can say is that I'm doing my part. And I think the Chinese like to get impressions from some non-Chinese person about their culture and things like the I Ching. And like I said, I'm very concerned about where we are with regard to the environment and where we are politically right now. And I have a grandson, actually my second born daughter lives in Hong Kong. She was married to an Indian person who was in the clothing industry there. And so I'm very concerned about my grandson who's 10 years old, about what it'll be like when he gets to be my age, 70 years from now, or what state the planet will be in. And my vision is that if all the rulers, people of power on the planet use something like the I Ching, that we could be guided by wherever those answers come from, however you want to phrase it. I think we would be much better off. We certainly need a lot of wisdom at this time, and we certainly have very little of it here in America. But whenever I teach in China, I incorporate as much as I can about the I Ching and hexagrams and things like that. And if you're interested in seeing how I do that, on my blog site, if you scroll down to the general index, or you can just Google Dennis Merritt, Cinderella Orange County, Yuma. And I gave a 3-hour presentation there on Cinderella. And I looked at the Grimm's version of Cinderella. And instead of a fairy godmother, which is the Disney French version, it's much more Taoist. And I made a case that Cinderella connected with the archetypal feminine energy, which what the Tao points to, that definition I gave of the Tao. So I framed our German fairy tale Cinderella in a Taoist concept. So this is the way that I'm working here and kind of bringing together China and America. It's an amazing culture. And I think my wife taught at the Chinese medical school for 2 years. She taught parasitology. And the Chinese have thought about all these ways they can make money. So they knew there were a lot of Indians who wanted to be doctors. But there weren't enough medical schools in India. So the Chinese set up English-speaking medical schools in China. And they needed a parasitologist, and my wife is a parasitologist, so she taught over there for 2 years. And then wrote a book on it called Once Upon a Time in China, Worms, which are the parasites of Cha, English word tea, is the same as it is in China, worms, Cha, and a harmonious society. So she's the one who told me about this real emphasis of worming in China. It goes back to that yin yang symbol, right? You never get this imbalance. And that was Jung's main critique of Christianity. In his Answer to Job, one of my favorite books by Jung, basically makes the point that instead of yin yang, we're in the heart of the light yang, got that dark element related to the yin. So in the heart of the dark yin, you have a white. So, but in Christianity, you drive the good to the perfect. The only complement then is you drive the bad to evil. And that creates a split in your whole culture. Jung said it plays out in the culture, and it's played out very clearly now, I think, in our American culture, where you have a lot of the right being associated with the Christian right, and so on. And I, like I said, from my Berkeley days, I've been very involved with politics. And one of the frightening things I think was Sinclair Lewis has said, if fascism comes to America, it'll be a crucifix wrapped in a flag. Right? I think that's what we're teetering on right now. You got to be very careful when you bring to in Jungian worldview, the spiritual dimension is the most powerful one that you can experience. And Jung went on and on about too much rationalism, too much science will keep you kind of with your cultural perspective from being able to get into that room. But if you look at our Greek systems, each god or goddess had their worldview. So there's a place for science. That was Apollo. That was our moonshot. That's, you look at everything in a very rational way. But then you had Aphrodite, you had Ares, and so on and so on. And they all have valid worldviews and how they fit together. That's what the Greek myths are about. So that's an ecological concept. But when you have, something where there's just like one God, and everybody else in the world better believe it or you're going to hell, and we'll have drag you there, that's, to me, I'm speaking personally, that's a tremendous imbalance for the psyche. So the way I think of religions then is they are organized to help you get into that realm. And if they're not helping you get into that realm, as when Jung talked about Christianity, then it means the myth is dead. It's gotten reduced to dogma, empty dogma, and so on. There's no more light in it. And especially, Jung said, when you lose the animal symbolism in your religion, that's a bad sign.
Okay, I think we want to stop the recording at this point, maybe people can talk with you individually.
Okay, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy Easter. From a Taoist perspective.
Good.